welcome to 327 students, and welcome to all of our guests. I am just going to very briefly introduce our poet and translator today, and I'm just going to let her do all the work of reading her poetry to you, and I hope you'll have plenty of questions about her poetry and about her creative process. Inés García is a poet, an artist, and a literary translator who was born in Ufa, in Bashkortostan, which is very far east on the west part of Russia. She has lived in Berlin for the last 15 years, though. She graduated from the Studiela Collective School of Engaged Art in St. Petersburg, and she holds a BA in dance, context choreography from the Berlin University of the Arts, Lübeck. Ina locates her practice at the interests of movement and writing, and she creates work in the form of installation, performance, sound, and video poetry. Her Russophone, her Russophone poetry collections include Nikti Tarchat, Loose Threads, which was published in 2021, and Daragoy Человек, or Dear Person, which was published in 2024. Ina translates between Russian, English, Ukrainian, and German. Her multilingual poetry has appeared in her chapbooks Oversight and Sealed, as well as in Amulet, Gulf Coast, and other magazines. Her first English language poetry collection, Distance, was published by Feliz Books in 2025. So please join me in welcoming that.
Thank you, Inés. Thank you for coming. I'll talk about my work a little bit, and then read poems, and then we'll have a discussion. So I moved to Germany in 2011 to pursue my education in dance. I chose contemporary dance for two reasons. Its relatively horizontal community and the belief in a language or communication system we haven't yet mastered. Although contemporary dance doesn't deny one of its lineages, the ballet modern tradition, it takes a more semantic approach and relies on developing a physicality of your own, one that is capable of responding to different circumstances. You develop skills for improvising and creating a performance that may include your own body, be intended for other bodies, or exclude bodies altogether, turning into an installation. A concept, score, state, the real-time composition are your main tools. Another trait is that contemporary performance is often cross-disciplinary, working at the intersection of media. After a long immersion in the life of immigration, my Russian started to shift. I was using it only with a few close people, and it became a kind of verbal practice of recollection, like a tongue twister you don't know yet and have to figure out by doing. I became curious about putting Russian into relation with the other languages of my environment, English and German, and allowing for some cross-linguistic influence. At that point, I was used to writing about performance in English or practicing some scores, but I had never done any literary writing. I was lucky to extend my education into a more informal setting at the Studiela school, where I had a chance to realize that the process already unfolding physically could turn toward poetic form. I could note down what was taking place. Concluding, I could say that the point of departure for my poetry was Germany. Parting from the country of my birth made me into a poet. Just 2 years later, my practice in English followed. In Russian, my primary device involves exploring the spaces between phonemes and words, separating and reassembling to create both a soundscape and a visual entity. My English language poems look for an in-between space, a middle ground. They try to address, build a sentence, take things literally. These scenes and self-reflection remain quite transparent. Language choice and positionality are reflected within the poems. You said blah, and it's poetry. You said blah, and it's poetry. You said nothing, and that ought to be poetry. You left poetry out and stayed. You stated you are outstaying poetry. You stayed on the margins. You said vagina, and it was gigantic. You brought up Crocodile Gena and his genetics. You said poetics, and it's singular. You said Gulag and Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug. You moved out and settled. You led your poetry elsewhere. You have pronounced your patronymic. It wants to translate as wolf. You were told you are getting somewhere. You were told you are getting some what? You've taken water into your mouth. You are still mixing up German pronouns. You have named what your poetry means. You have the means to outgain your poetry. Your poetry weighs a lot. You load your poetry into travel and storages. Your stories outrageous. So a couple of notes. Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug is the place where Alexei Navalny was killed, and it's also an area where I actually spent my first years. So, for instance, you've taken water into your mouth. It's like a direct translation of nabrat v rot vody, which is not being able to speak. What do we have? Vagina. There was this huge, well, not many of you follow the Russophone Facebook stories, but there is this important poem by Galina Rimbo, My Vagina, and many people didn't like this word being used at all. The next one. J'arrive à Paris lundi. Déjà arrivé, я уже arrivé, я уже сожрала, сожалела, сопереживание в сотрудничестве. Вот мой proof. Du bist aufgerufen, du bist nicht aufgerufen. Please open your passport, wave it, wait in. Please talk on your language. J'arrive, please talk. People are concerned that your tongue is not eaten or lost on the way. Your language is as mono as that of any citizen. It is one language. No pieces to be taken from it. No particulars within borders. One language, one destiny. What did you imagine you'd manage? Bite it. No piece. Chew it all. Don't swallow. All of it can be taken by any other mono citizen. For a native speaker in Russian, you say носитель языка, literally translates as a bearer of a language. Not so much to do with nature. The sensation of carrying it around became turbulent, combining shame, confusion, and the desire to claim it back. You cannot call Russian innocent, but another extreme, calling it one and the same, is even more unbearable. I try to consider that people from different localities have developed and embodied their own kind of language. This doesn't exclude colleagues with the same kind of passport I carried for most of my life. At this point, I could switch to the German one. И да будет дан язык тебе, и не будет в нем ничего, кроме я, з, ык, а. И да придут народности и скажут, что язык не твой, твой. И придут другие и скажут, что твой не твой язык. И ты будешь искать и не находить в языке твоем дыры ни одной. И не останется в тебе осадковой языковости, и не соткется целого, и не будет для языка твоего места на словах, и не будет для языка твоего места без уста. Власти выползет заноза знака, и здесь будет яс твой лежать, распоясавшийся, там расположится ык. И придут те, кто не скажут, и уйдут другие, еще не раскрывавшие глаз, сившие, и моргать будет через раз ворот, и воротятся, еще не успевшие вставить свои. Свечки будут держаться на плаву, и вы возьмете метр и превратите его в скотч, расколотый клеящимися отрезками. И с кем-то можно будет не говорить, и греться можно будет при бреге, и приберегут то, что осталось от твоего языка, влепят за пазуху, захватят за оба конца, приближая начало. The translation is by me and Eugenia Stashevsky. And language shall be given unto you, containing nothing but language. And peoples shall come and say that the language that is not yours is your language. And others shall come and say that your language is not your language. And you will seek out holes in your language, and you will find not one. There will be no sedimental tongueness left in you, no hole to be woven. And your language will have no place in any word that is in any mouth. And your language will have no place that is not longer. And there shall astound the stimulus of the sign. And your lung will lie here long unbound. But there was, and there will come those who won't say, and there will live those who haven't yet held the throat open and blink and turn around, and there shall come around those who haven't yet put their two tappers to stay afloat, feet 3 1/3 to meet in a meter, to pattern it into tape, split and sectioned with sticky cuts. And you could forego talking to some, find warmth by the shore, who shall shore up what is left of your language, soak it close in their cloth, take it at both ends to bring on the beginning. Normalerweise muss man нормальные слова usать. Usually I should have a clue what words to use. They are cueing us to be klug, встают в круг. Auf eine Wiese, wissend. Someone is at ease with words when they release them orderly. Oder, li, liszka, eng. Unleash, malinka. Usually words come in clusters. They are sculpted into a snowman, who is also a no man. Sophia says she's fond of anomalies. A form of a norm is enormous, then a mouse runs by. Usually I get lemons or the limits of words prone to imitation. Normally, I have to correct. Usually I need to come up with more ordinary speech. Speech in Russian is almost bitter without go. It leaks out unbidden until someone puts up a wall. Someone bitter. So the word that I'm talking here is gorich and or just rich. German is the language of my immigration, which also brings some pressure and the need to comply. I do write in German as well, but so far it is the least autonomous language I practice. Working in 3 different base languages is my strategy to resist the necessity of a third party to be represented through somebody else's translation. Or else you can work in collaboration with translators, making it yet another creative process that is interested in the language contact zone and doesn't claim that a translation can be a substitution. For the multilingual poems in my English language collection, I include glosses or fragmented translations in italics. Though I don't usually pronounce them, I like how they extend into a landscape, testing some autonomy and prolonging the relation. Im, voraus, impact, implication. I am implied in this, implication, in this, намерение, намера, пресечение, сечь, приближение, прибавление, to come, to come in, to welcoming. Too much of a well one can hear in a well. Its borders are welcoming the sound. Sound bounces back, backlash, backstage, backstagnieren. To stash in a stock, squish oneself in a stock, stack onto, accumulate, акупунктур, аккумулятор, зарядка, за, рядом, за, here, once. It is the end of the day what matters at the end of the day. Time is not there for us, it is not there for them. Time belongs to a body of work to be dealt with by dawn. The business is sketchy, it's a draft, skipping a couple of days. Time is of the essence, but it runs off course, has rolled, that course, taucht ein in die Täuschung, in the name and mire of hope. So I wrote this poem in February 24 in response to Navalny's body being withheld from his relatives in the first days. And for example, Meyer, this comment is unrelated. Meyer for me relates to mir, Russian beer. So usually, I come back here. Usually it's sound that makes you jump the rails into another language, like of course, but of course, for instance. Though a translational gesture or association may be involved as well. Sound and sense across languages often cross your mind simultaneously. In the process of picking, the speech flow slows down. The message is formed consequentially, and the reader may get a taste of its twists in real time. Did you touch my English? Did you detach my English? Did you debrief my English? Did you break my English? Did you English with my English? Did you fool around with my English? Did you ask my English for favors? Did you depart from my favor in a boat? Were you given it the cold shoulder? How do you like my English? Have you listened to it? Did you pay attention? Did you pay it a visit? Have you visited my ink land? Have you been landing around here? Are you attached to my English? Would you retouch my English? Would you give it a dressing down? Have you passed by my English? Have you entered the field of my English? What flowers grow there? Have you walked around my English? Were you on ink leash? Did you pass up on my English? Would you pass my English on? Does my English leave you at an impasse? Would you turn the other way? Would you listen with another ear? Has my ear been long enough for you? Does this belong in English? Does this belong in English? Did you include something that doesn't belong here? This is the poem I never dared to read out loud. I thought today might be the day. What do my dad and I have in common? We came about in a similar way. Our upbringing was divergent. I was already up, he kept bringing it on. I floated indefinitely until a choice came about. He had an accident with wires as a kid. He couldn't get the right university cred. Despite excelling in math, he did not pass, not universal enough. He was maybe it's not the day. Or should I still finish? He was set up to fail, he was set up to fall. I had it falling into my hands, I had it coming in handy. I waited little but waited. No, I wait little but waited. It made me more insistent. I also have a sister. She is due for a second coming about now. Her second coming is also a human. My second coming was the choice of the first cat. Another person is on the tip of my tongue. The one who bears it and bore us. Only I wonder sometimes, from whom exactly does a mother acquire her tongue? And if there is a line to continue, with whom do I share my part? Facilitating translation of my Russophone work, I choose poems that are more responsive and introduce my minor multilinguality to reflect the shifts and influences in the original. Вчера был солнце, солнце был светлым, день был холодным, деревня была далекой, койка была с котиками, просыпались вместе, про соль речь не шла. Шлепали по ступеням, пили водицы бутылок, переливали из стакана в стакан, с руки на руку переводилось место, стенки прочно проваливались, prejudice представала перед. Передача шла концом. Поворачивались напротив. Первый раз удался, второй раз удавался, третий раз удовольствие, четвертый раз вдоволь, пятый раз вдоль, на седьмой раз доводился на сесть на селе. Ния. Yesterday was sunshine, sunshine were bright, the day was cold, the village was distant, the court held cats. We walked together, no word said about salt, set out downstairs, downed water skins, poured from glass to glass, space passing hand to hand, walls solidly collapsing, prejudice stand for transmission ran and first turn standing across, first attempt effective, second attempt effective, third attempt in affect, fourth attendance all full, fifth andante flatwise, seventh tilt toward on settled settlement. Translated by me and Elina Alter. Yes, I wanted to talk about this line. So prejudice is simply transported to the translation, but then I remembered that представать перед is, for me, associated with the court. And as there is this Russian English, I decided to turn it into German. And I like this confusion that it's in the past, stand, but you can also read it as stand. So, but then for kind of implies that it's foreign. Do you give more time to a reader who reads herself in translation? She and her stunt double, do you see double, is translation as stunt? Is it line auf einer besetzbaren Matratze? Is it a double bed? Is it a bed, double, or nothing? Did you set a privacy wall? Is there a template? Is there another to follow? Are you late for the next reader? Does the space support the separation? Are we attached to a two-sided cord? Do you depart from a point of origin? Do you trace yourself from your point of arrival? Is another language a rival? Do you race for both? Pretext, предтеча, preposition, excuse. I suggest you read half as much twice. I suggest you take twice as much time. I suggest you stay in the middle and mind the audience. We might have tons of suggestions adjusting to tongues. Mutilation, grain, gain, against the grain. Extending into visual and performative layers is my choice for dealing with multilinguality, enlarging the experience of listener and reader, including those who are strangers to the inset languages I'm using. Once pronounced, a foreign word draws nearer, and its presence within a familiar language is more felt. Maybe we don't have that much time, so I'll do two more poems. And this one, I think, was assigned for your reading. How long is the letter I? How lonely is the letter I? How long is the sound chew? How deep is the sound? How deep is the sea? Have you seen the letter I? Did it show up? Did it show down? How long is the downtime of a downing letter I? Of a drowning letter, of a drawn letter, of a gesture of letter to the left, of a left letter to stay unattended, unended, in a long-sounding, ungestured letter, in a let be letter, in a let it liter, in a letter trying to say a in pursuing the latter, in catching the letter at its end, having consulted with a tailor. Do you move to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
I heard myself speaking. I heard myself. I heard myself speaking. I heard it myself. I heard it my herself, my himself, my part of my him herself spoke. I spoke of myself with a shady self. Self-seal wasn't possible, no salvation, here fuba. It enacted a fugitive feige. I got myself some fatigue in hearing, heard no more, heard partially, no part, after no part. It has parted me and left with some parts. I was departed among parts. They would not gather, they would build a wooden wood with no forest there. I would not hear myself. I could not have heard. I could have heard it, the hearing alone. Who would have heard, repeat after me, who would have passed by the outpost, who would have posted a brief out there after hearing something left out alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina, for this reading and performance. We still have 25 minutes, and I think Ina would be interested in hearing about your reactions. You might have questions. Maybe while you think about it, I can start posing a question, and then so Ina, just a very obvious question. Your last collection is in English, right? Distance is a German title. Sounding German is a deconstructed German word. Sounds like English, but it's spelled in German, and it's in English. So, what language has the strongest, like, gravitational pull for you now, and how has this evolved, if at all, over the years?
So I cannot choose one language.
Mm-hmm.
I have different relation to each of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to insist I'm still a bilingual poet, and it's already not easy, as I mentioned earlier. Somehow with English I prefer to perform, I prefer to read in English as well. I feel it's more communicative in a way, my work in English. In German I still write quite few, so I cannot call myself a German language poet yet, but I might be going there as well at one point. Also multilingual work, I guess, is something I'm much more into the recent years, because I don't need a because for that, but I think it becomes more embodied in a way that have to pronounce it. Like I know that some of you won't be reading all 3 or more languages, so I know I have to pronounce it and I have to put it into space and yeah.
You mentioned working in tandem with translators on some of your works, and this question has multiple parts, so feel free to answer whatever you want to answer. But do you believe the best way to preserve authenticity of a piece is to have the author themselves work with the translator? Can translators capture the essence of someone else's writing? And do you think that writers today should prioritize language learning?
Can you, like, I haven't heard all of it. Can you repeat the second part?
Of course. Do you think that translators can capture the essence of someone else's writing?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that writers today should prioritize learning languages?
Well, the first one, if the author themselves should translate their work, I think in collaboration it works well because the author still knows what was behind and why this sequence, and translator sometimes takes distance and sees the text for what it is. So in this, like especially for poetry, I think working in collaboration is nice, but then you need the author need to know the language enough. For that, I also try to give feedback to if someone translates into German, but I'm less proficient in it, so I can influence less. Sometimes the author is too authoritative, like they want to control too much, and that might also not be good for a translated text, because it should have also some autonomy. It will become another text, and you need to let go. Yeah, I already forgot the other parts.
Oh yeah,
Language
if
learning,
yeah,
whether it's good or bad,
if poets should learn
for
languages.
writers.
I think it's great. No, I mean, if you learn languages, but if it becomes a must, then you are again pressured, and maybe I could know that translators should the work of translators should be more respected, and also you should be curious. If you've seen a translated text, you should be curious about what they write on their own.
This is another question that's related to translation. Do you think that when say you translate a whole poem, for example, do you think that it's replacing the original, supporting it, or is it its own independent piece of work?
Well, replacing, especially in poetry or poetry that's dependent on language this much, like my work, or replacing isn't possible at all. So we always talk about 2 texts, and then you might not have access to both. But you should be aware that it's also a text, another text. The translated one was what? Sorry, I keep forgetting things.
I said, well, do you see translation as replacing the original, supporting it, or becoming an independent performance?
Well, total independent is also not possible, but that we know that there was a source, so there was a process behind it. So total autonomy is there are some translators who would really take it quite far from the original, but then they would probably mention it, and then they would say inspired by, or not just translated. But please speak up.
Yeah, maybe stand up, and project, please.
This kind of relates to the other questions that you just answered, but when you see your work translated, or when you translate your work itself, do you ever feel as though some of the original meaning is lost in translation? And if so, how do you navigate that?
I try that the gesture is in some way the gesture in the original is in some way not repeating but enacted. And also I prioritized word combinations so that there is a word combination in a translation as well, which might be a different combination, but it relates to the original text. And when I feel, so I try that it doesn't say the opposite. If I have control, or I mean most days I do have a word, a saying into it, like, yeah, I trace that it doesn't say the opposite, but if it goes sideways, I'm fine.
Do you feel like when you're either writing or just thinking, you tend to think in one language or the other, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I think I'm talking to myself in a mix of language. And often it's the kind of translingual combination that triggers me to start writing, or some kind of relation that I find across languages that
Inspires?
yeah, that start the thinking process and the language process, that I stick to the first line and then I develop it further. Sometimes it's confused, even for yourself, it's confusing to speak in too much of a mix. But mostly it's rather enlarging your presence in some way.
I was curious about the poem about a language, which was both in Russian and English.
Yeah.
It seemed very similar to like some of the biblical texts,
Yeah.
kind of Old Testament, that kind of prescriptive tone of do that, and particularly like talking about the language. I was wondering if the reference was towards one of the stories in the Bible where it's like, I think people are trying to build a temple and they unsuccessfully, they weren't able to do it, so therefore they were cursed with speaking multiple languages. I was wondering if that was a reference, and also some of the wording there seemed very similar. Maybe we can pull it up. I actually don't remember exact examples, but there was something about like, maybe we can see it. It's like logical opposites that are very common in like Orthodox prayers, especially. Like твой не твой язык, не твой твой. It just like that also felt kind of like resembling that. So I was just like curious whether that was inspired or mocking or kind of in a way related to kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the tone is for sure mocking, I guess,
Yeah.
because I don't know the Bible enough.
Okay.
And I didn't try to find a specific text that I would want to relate to.
Okay.
So yeah, it's rather like this importance of a word, of a saying, and it reflects the language, so it fits. I don't think I have many poems in this tone. And then with English version, like Eugene did some corrections because I wasn't capable of doing like the same tone in English. But yeah, I was curious to find some references between the two.
I was wondering about the monolinguality and translinguality, because I think that we often associate monolinguality as a normal natural condition of literature, because it is associated with national literature and like existential one language that produces this national literature. But on the level of social reality, too often social conditions make us imposed to other languages. For example, when you speak one language at home, you order coffee at the second language, you speak with your partner at the third language. So in this kind of social reality, is this translinguality, is it like innovation, an experimental trait of your poetry, or is it something that reflects our reality as people with experience of migration, displacement, and how to think about these translingual experiments in era where, on the contrary, having been exposed just to one language, sometimes it's a privilege or a condition that is not accessible to so many of us.
Mm. Well, I've never thought of it as an opposite, like, but it's true that literature somehow is, especially for prose, we are used to having like one stream of the language choice. So I guess it does reflect a lot the everyday and the social situation of an immigrant or someone living in a multilingual environment like Berlin, for instance. At the same time, there was like the futurist poetry or the concrete poetry has been quite multilingual quite a while ago. So it's not like it's out of the blue. But I think it's nice that the contemporary literature picks up this traits and like mainly allows to just not stick to one language. And then there are several choices, like if you put these glosses, or some authors choose not to put any translations in, which is also a political choice, then you would have to find your own way into the text. And even with the glosses, it's not like it repeats. Sometimes it's just like another kind of fragment. I personally, for example, for multilingual work, I don't like to make full other versions of translation. So when I translate, I usually choose a text with a clear base language. Just because also I have so many texts, why would I kind of want to multiply it even more? So I think it's a nice turn that is happening, this translingual, multilingual community growing across different countries, and also then we can even understand each other better because someone working with English, Russian, German, for instance, it's not like I can stick to Germany, like I don't have to, I can yeah.
When I was reading like some of the poems, I felt like they had like a beat, and then when you read them, then you also performed them. Like when you write, do you first like write it out and then add in like the choreography, or do you plan it as you're writing? And I was also curious if you like what motivates you to stick to poetry versus like short stories or maybe like novels.
So the performative element is usually improvised. Like there is this real-time composition method I mentioned. So I'm really curious about having a text that is set and trying to enact it differently every time. I'm in a room with these concrete people. It might get a bit more performative if it's a stage, or casual if it's a bookstore, for instance. So I don't have a plan for how I'm gonna perform them. I have a certain rhythm, which sometimes I even try to break because I'm tired of it as well. So I used to have like very specific pauses, and sometimes I try to pronounce quicker or like make a different pause. And so even this is improvised a little bit. Why do I no prose and short stories? No, I'm not there. Like being a bilingual poet is a lot. I don't think I have this thinking of another literary. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this work, for sharing it with us. This is sort of a bigger picture question about your work, your body of work, and how it is evolving. I can feel in the poems and see in the poems what you shared with us about the way they advance by a kind of collision of sound and sense. And there's a lot of propulsion and energy that works through language and languages in the work. And I'm wondering, having allowed this sort of freedom of play, in a sense, in the work over years. What are you discovering sort of in the cracks between the languages as they move through, let's say, a poem? What do you feel this is kind of opening for you over time, this sort of approach, your creative process that's unique to you?
Well, one of the observations is that you don't need to have a linguistic education or literary education to write poetry, and I think sometimes it also gives you less self-criticism, because you just go there. You might still check etymology and try to see if the words are actually related, but for you what's more important is like physically somehow they are present for you, so you want to work with them. I mean, I like all this kind of observations about how languages collide, I think it's not just sound, but mostly it is sound. And also with sound, it's not just like word to word, but sometimes like this in between the sayings that kind of throw you somewhere else. Yeah. What I also learned, but that's quite specific to me, is that a poem is physical, and the more it is physical, the more I trust it. So that's why probably I don't write the longer texts and the kind of sentences, because then I cannot relate to them anymore. I cannot hold them, I cannot recite them. So for me, the best poems are the ones that are like really stick to me and I'm capable of pronouncing them again and again.
Who's your ideal reader?
A listener. I think the experience of understanding all the languages is probably would be the most fit, but at the same time, even when we work with the language we both speak, we are not always understanding each other. So again, I guess the physicality is important. So the presence of a poem is enough for almost any reader to find their own connection to it.
You write, is another language a rival? Do you race for both? My question is, how do you reconcile with this question?
So English and Russian are two different for me, and they do compete, but not that much. I think I'm rather in the confusion about like institutionally, also because Russian became like publishing in Russian became harder, and also your own feelings have changed. So for me, it's more the question of infrastructure with these two languages, for instance, than the language itself. Yeah, but I'm not ready to give up.
In some of the poems we read, you do like embody that role of the reader and try to talk about the role of a reader as well. What like inspired you to want to talk about that? Was it like reactions to your work, and also how do you think people should approach your work or other multi-linguistic work, even if they don't have an understanding of all the languages involved?
I think, yeah, I know the poem you're relating to, like, hi, I'm your reader, I'm reading your work, so it already answers you as a reader should, and read my work in terms of like, put your own take onto it. and I wrote it after reading an article about translingualism. So sometimes when I do that, reading articles, I feel people are really concentrated on English and on Latin language, Latin alphabet languages. So yeah, I feel like Cyrillic or another alphabet should also be present in the translingual text. And I kind of already touched this question of how do I see the readers that are not understanding all the languages. So one thing is this fragmented translations, but it's an aid. It's never like really gives you an experience. The full experience. Another strategy is like this visual. So it's even like another language that you overlay it with. That these are, And I guess also there should be an acceptance that this is the reality of multilingual work, and there is not much you can do about it. Learning languages, but I'm really shy to.
Sorry for the second question, but another kind of poet, rapper, writer who writes in Russian, English, and German. I'm thinking of Oxymoron. Not so much in English, but Russian and German for sure. He uses a lot of the similar techniques with rhyming, kind of like using roots, similar roots, words with similar roots but different meanings, or different roots but similar sounding roots. And there's like some alliteration going on. And a lot of criticism that he gets is that it sounds amazing, but kind of the meaning could have been more precise if some other word was used that's not rhyming, similar sounding, etc. But it's such a powerful technique. To me personally, as a listener, I really delight in hearing something that sounds similar to the previous. So I was wondering, how do you balance in making word choice? Do you ever encounter a problem with, oh, this sounds so good, but maybe actually I could have used some other word for a better caption of meaning? Is there a balancing that goes on in your head sometimes when you have to make word choices?
I think my method and device is like always to look for the negotiation of the sense and sound. So I don't think I ever really lose sense in terms, like I don't compromise because it's already a compromise. Like my whole writing process is the choosing this between the two. Sometimes when there is a switch into another language, I ask myself if it's really necessary, and I might edit if it's not that necessary. But then for me, would the criteria would rather be the sound that is like the more collision there is, the better, I guess. And then several meanings might emerge in this collision, several senses.
In one of your poems, you referred to translation as a stunt, and then you said that you had a stunt double.
Yeah.
I was wondering what inspired that, and if your views on that have changed. If your views on that have changed, or you still see yourself as
Stunt.
yeah. He's on page.
Yeah, now I remember. Okay. I don't think it's a stunt, it's a practice. But it's a bit unpredictable, so you like for example, I don't translate when I'm tired or when I feel like I really try to choose the right state for translation, because I feel once I've translated it not that well, like already I've spoiled my path. But I mean, it's really so personal, and I don't translate other people's work that much. I would feel more responsible for that. At the same time, I feel the more you try to translate, also the more you understand the poem, and you shouldn't really be afraid of trying it out, even if it's just a practice. And also translating into your second or third language, or like you shouldn't stick to your first language when you try to translate.
Any other question?
Yes. You use you a lot throughout your poetry. I was wondering, like, two questions, I guess. Like, why do you use you a lot? Is it because you find it most natural to address your poetry?
Sorry.
You use you a lot in your poetry, and I was wondering, do you find it most natural to address your poetry to something or someone?
Mm.
And then also, is there something that it's directed to?
Is there someone or something? Yeah, that's also a nice observation, that I actually use you, but not the Russian you, and not that much yeah, but a lot of I or ich. I guess when you work in second, third, or also with a language that has less gender markers, the addressing is a bit easier. At least that's what happens for me. I do have a concrete you sometimes. I have a more general you, like a community, a group of people. Not all of my I's is me, but most of them, I guess. Sometimes an I is rather a letter, as you've heard. Yeah, so I think with my English language work, I kind of really interested in addressing. And also finding it out in the process, whom exactly do I address? So it may also like evolve within one poem. Like I could start with addressing someone concrete, and then it goes for like, yeah. I also think it's a nice, poetry is generally a lot about trying to address and finding your addressee, and who are you in this moment when you address someone or some people.
So what is good about English, and what is good about, do these languages, as you get to know them and you kind of go between them, are there things about German that are better in certain circumstances as a poet? In English and Russian, how do you weigh
Yeah.
the languages in terms of what they express?
Yeah, German is better for someone with Russian as a first, because morphologically it's a bit closer. It also has prefixes. Like in my Russian language work, I'm super busy with prefixes and prepositions. English and German are more related, so then like you have words that are written the same but are pronounced and mean different things. For example, Eugene Ostashevsky works a lot with the combination of English and German. I sometimes also feel, because of the GDR history, like even like older generation actually understand German more than English. I mean, older generation of Russian speakers, for instance. So there is something about that as well, like of the relation of German and Russian. Gender markers that I mentioned, in Russian you cannot escape kind of saying like the verb would signify, unless you use a plural form, it would signify what gender you or the person is. But you can also mix it up in a way, like you don't have to make it possible one to the other. I think they are complementary to me. And I'm interested in all the intersection of the three and two.
Kind of tying back to the you and I conversation, when you're writing, do you write for the intention of writing for yourself, like you being the reader, or do you write, like in the back of your mind knowing that other people are going to read it?
It can be both. Sometimes I have a stronger imagination of whom I'm addressing. Sometimes it's really the language that drives me, and then I cannot say it's just to me that I'm writing to, but I'm writing in order for this sequence of words to appear. And then like I half pronounce what I write, half loud, what is it called? Yeah. So again, I guess it's again the physicality, and then with the physicality you actually don't know for who, like it doesn't belong to anyone. I mean, I am the one pronouncing it, but then it's just there, and then it can then address someone. But some of the poems have a bit stronger intention of whom they wanna address.
Okay, well, we have time for one. For one last question. Otherwise, I'll ask a last question and we'll wrap up because it's getting time actually. Okay, then I'll wrap up. This might be a difficult question because I'm asking you to think of the what ifs of life. If you had not gone through an experience of emigration out of Russia into Germany, traveling around, where do you think you would be as a poet, or do you think you would have become a poet? Do you think that plays a role?
I don't think I would be a poet.
Mm-hmm.
So dance was a clear decision I made, but all the other kind of circumstances brought me into language and poetry, and mainly the environment. So yeah, I hardly imagine other circumstances where I would have become a poet.
Good, so on that note, thank you everybody. Thank you, Ina, for your
And if you get another question, you can write me an email.
Yeah, we're gonna hang around here for another 10 minutes.